We continue our trek through Baba Metzia, and we have reached the material that sort of leads into the very famous Oven of Achnai story. And it's about overreach. Well, there are a lot of ways to translate this. Overreach. What else? Rabbi Goldberg, what else? How else?
Steinsaltz English has been using exploitation.
Exploitation, thank you.
I like, sometimes it's fraud. I'm in the fraud camp, that this is about fraud, but everyone has,
okay.
Yeah, fraud. Yeah. Not frogs were one of the plagues, but this was fraud.
AUD. Lots of ways to translate it. Important and interesting concept, and we saw it in terms of monetary things, and we're also now seeing it in terms of interpersonal relations. And so we're joined this morning by Rabbi Goldberg, who I understand is going to be diving deeper into this topic and looking at the biblical sources with us today.
Yes.
And I believe we're assembled, so go ahead.
There we go. Good morning, everybody, or good whatever time of day it is. Sorry for my East Coast bias. I feel like this is the real committed crew for the Daf Yomi class, like the day after, Seder's. If I were doing this might be the day I took off, although I'm here today. So then my colleagues could take off. But thanks for being here. We had an intensive couple days, right, for our Jewish ritual life and involvement, but here we're back studying again. I find especially, the challenge of the holidays are full, but Daf Yomi still moves on. Like, if I were doing the Daf Yomi cycle, it might be that when it's Yom Tov, you get a day off. It might take an extra month or two to finish the Talmud, but no, that's not how we do it. Even on the holidays, even on Shabbat, we still have a page that goes by. So we're still moving forward, and we're here for some highlights of the week. As Rachel said, we've been talking about ona'ah, exploitation or fraud or overreach or overcharging. A conversation that starts in transactions in the Mishnah and then the Gemara that follows. And I think we're just about today or tomorrow. I just looked up a Mishnah is coming that takes what we learned about financial interactions and says, right, in our interpersonal relations, how can we make sure not to overreach or overcharge or exploit each other? And what I wanted to do today is to go back to the book of Vayikra and look at the verses that are used to create all these laws. And let me give you a little background about why I'm doing this and what that means here and what I hope you'll take away from it from the end. My Talmud teachers always told me, but they required me and my fellow students when we would start a chapter of Mishnah or a chapter in the Talmud, before you opened up the rabbinic text, the requirement was you have to read the verses or the chapters in the Torah or the Bible as a whole that play into what's happening. Why? Because seeing the verses in the original context first lets you know where the verses that undermine, that support, that are the foundations for these laws come from. And they also can expose really what it is the rabbis are doing in shaping Jewish law in the Talmud. And sometimes there's a direct line. What you read you read some verses in the Torah, and you see interpretation in the Talmud, or expansion, or filling in some gaps. Sometimes you read in the Torah and you see something a little bit different from what the rabbis do with the verses, and it opens up your eyes. It could open up our eyes to what the rabbinic endeavor is and what the Talmud is. And that's what we're going to look at today. So we're going to look at the first 17 verses of Leviticus chapter 25. You don't have to open it up. I'm going to give you some slides in a minute. And I'm actually, as I'm talking, going to put the link to my slides into the chat. It's there in the chat if you wanted to open up. We're going to look at just the biblical verses today, talk about what they mean in their original context, and then talk about what the rabbis have done with it in the pages that we've been reading for the last week and the next couple that are coming this week ahead. So that's the plan. Hope that's okay. I'm going to share my screen now, and then we're going to move forward. Sound good? That's not the best way to do it on Zoom. Sound good? I guess it has to sound good, or either way. All right. So Leviticus chapter 25, just so you could follow the header on there are 3 slides. The header on all the slides says 1 through 17. All the slides are 1 through 17. These are the first 5 or so of those verses. Here's here we go. Here are the first verses, the first sort of section that sets the context for the verses that we're coming up to. So God says to Moses on Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I assign to you, you shall observe a Sabbath of God, a Shemitah, right? Shemitah for Adonai. This is introducing the agricultural laws about the Shemitah year that just like we have 6 days of the week and then a day of Shabbat where we don't work, these are the laws where God says in the Torah, work the land for 7 years and then take the 7th year off. So 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Shabbat of complete rest, a Shabbat of God, and you shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. Right? We've seen sources about the Shemitah year a little bit already in Daf Yomi. If you've been with us since the beginning, there'll be more passages to follow. These are the verses about this. Right? You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a complete year of rest for the land. So just like people get a Shabbat, so too does the land. Some agricultural folks say this is good, right? It's good to renourish the land, not just as, right? Shabbat's good for us, Shabbat's good for the land and ultimately the crops. And you might wonder, what do we do? If we can't harvest, what do we do? God, the last pasuk on this slide says, right, you may eat whatever the land during the Shemitah will produce. You, your male and female slaves, the hired and bound laborers who live with you, and the cattle and beasts in your land may eat all its yield. So you can't work the land, but whatever grows, whatever seeds are left in the field that self-fertilize from the year before and grows, you can eat. That's the initial context that's coming. And the next set of verses is going to bring us a little closer to the verses that are behind what's been going on in the Talmud. So next slide. So you shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years for a period of 7 weeks of years, giving you a total of 49 years. If you notice that it's a little clunky, this verse, 7 weeks of years, right? There's the 7-year cycle for Shemitah, and then there's a 7 times 7 year cycle. So 7 cycles of Shemitah lead to 49 years. And then you shall sound the horn in the 7th month on the 10th day of the month, Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and you shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. So we have this Shemitah cycle, 6 years of work, 1 year of rest. That happens 7 times. And after the 49th year, there's a 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all of its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. It's called Yovel in Hebrew. So the 50th year in the cycle is a big deal. And I highlighted here, each of you shall return to your holding. Each of you shall return to your family. I want to talk about that in a second. I do want to note that as today is the 2nd day of the counting of the Omer, right? It's this cycle of years of 7 times 7 and a big deal celebration, the 50th year. We're doing the mini version of that between Pesach, Passover, which we just had. Starting on the 2nd day, we count 7 weeks, 7 times 49 days. And the 50th day is Shavuot, the holiday of Shavuot, when we celebrate both the agricultural harvest and the receiving of the Torah. That cycle of 7 times 7 plus 1 is in the counting of the Omer, and it's also in the cycle of years agricultural. So the 50th year, a number of things happen, and the one I want to focus on here, I highlighted in yellow. Each of us return to our holding and to our families. What does that mean? Did you know you had a holding to return to? maybe, but maybe not. I don't know what my holding is, but here's what they are. Um, when the Israelites came into the land in the book of Joshua, um, the um, the land as we know before the book of Joshua, the land is divided up right between the different tribes. But in the book of Joshua, there are long lists about where all the tribes settled and where each family and each tribe settled within their tribe's land. So in the biblical system, every Jewish family organized by tribe and then sub-tribe, right, received a portion of the land that became theirs. Right, the story of the Torah and the book of Joshua is about God's promise to give us the land after we right leave Egypt and travel and get there. And it's not just that all of us, right? You get to find the place that you want to settle. There was a system that said you settle where everyone settles in a place. The land was divided up according to the Bible, right? Someone must have, I don't know, I don't, the details of exactly how this happened aren't totally there, but the land was divided up into different areas, and each clan and sub-clan got their own portion of land. And what the Torah recognizes is over the course of time, you might have to move, you might have hard economic times, you might have to sell your land, things might happen. And the Jubilee year, this 50th year, is like a reset. At the end of 50 years, everybody goes back home to their land. And some of what that means, we'll see a little more on the next slide, but some of what that means is that the sale of land between Israelite families isn't permanent. It's not like, right, I live in my house now. The bank owns it mostly, but we have a mortgage that, right, it's our house. But once we pay off the bank, it's our house and it's ours till we sell it. And then we sell it to the next person, they get it, and that's just it, right? In this system, when you sell something, you're selling it just till the end of the Jubilee cycle, and then you have to go, you go back to your original plot of land, and we reorganize ourselves back to our original clans and tribes. The Torah tells us a little more about this. So note on this slide, what's in yellow reinforces the yellow from before, and the two blue verses are the ones we've seen a lot of about exploitation, fraud on the Talmud. So the 50th year is a Jubilee for you. You're not supposed to sow. It's like a Shemitah year. You also don't work the land. Neither shall you reap the aftergrowth or the harvest or the untrimmed vines, for it's a Jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may eat only the growth direct from the field. That's like Shemitah, the Jubilee year is a year you can't work the crops. If you're counting or doing the math, you might notice now that the 49th year is Shemitah and the 50th year is the Shemitah. At the end of a Yovel cycle, the Torah mandates 2 years of resting the land. And you might be asking, it's a great question. The rabbis in the Talmud ask it too in a number of places. Like, how is it possible that we don't work the land for 2 years and survive? And there's a whole rabbinic response to what that looks like. But it's potentially hard because you get to rest. There's less work, but where you get all the food from, harder to figure out. That's a topic for another day. I just wanted to call that out. The Torah then repeats, in this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to your holding. Now is this key paragraph. When you sell property to your neighbor or buy any property from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. This is the source that we've been using to say, charge fair prices when you go into this, right? When you go into a store and you buy tomatoes or a sweater or a book, the idea is you're not supposed to pay too little based on what it's worth, and the merchant's not supposed to pay too much. We've seen many, many conversations about this, but look at the context where this comes from. In buying and selling from your neighbor, you shall deduct only for the number of years since the Jubilee. And in selling to you, the person shall charge you only for the remaining crop years. The more such years, the higher price you may pay. The fewer such years, the lower the price. For what is being sold to you is the number of harvests. Right? Do not wrong one another, but fear your God. I am Adonai your God. So look at the context here. These verses, the blue ones that we've seen in the Talmud, are not about commerce just in the marketplace about anything. They're specifically tied to this notion of the Jubilee and the returning of the lands. And what does it mean? If it's I should have looked this up. I don't know where we are in the Jubilee cycle. People are still commenting. Someone will someone will throw it into the text, but I'll use a random number. If it's the 17th year of the Jubilee cycle, I think we're lower than that. But if it's the 17th year of the Jubilee cycle, what does that mean? 750 minus 17 is 33. If I sell my land to Rachel, she's going to have it for 33 years. So the price I could charge her is based on the fact that she's going to be able to harvest that land for 33 years. If, though, we jump ahead 10 years and there's only 23 years left till the Jubilee and I sell my land to Rachel, she's only going to get 23 harvests, so the price of the land is lower, according to the ideal system. And so we have to recognize you're not buying and selling the land in perpetuity. You're buying and selling the land based on how long it is till they have to give it back. Because in year 50, even though I sold the land to Rachel, I get to move back and she moves back to wherever she came before. And what does that protect? Well, it's one, it builds in this Jubilee cycle to the laws of buying and selling land. You're not buying and selling land forever. You're buying and selling land till the reset, charge the price based on the number of years that are left. And it keeps you from wronging the other person. How so? Well, what if the reason why I'm selling my land to Rachel is I've had like some tough harvests. I'm out of luck. I don't know. I have some debts. I lost a court case. I had to pay people, and I have to sell my land because I got nothing. It's hard times. But let's say there's only 3 years left in the Jubilee cycle. You know, if Rachel is following these verses as she would in real life, I would imagine how I know her. If there's 3 years left, she's buying the land from me only for 3 cycles. It's a lower price. If though we have, what's in the Marvel alternate universe or the Spidey verse? If there's evil Rachel who's buying the land from me, not the one we know in our universe, but knows I'm down on my luck, knows I have to sell my land, right? She might insist that that there's some, that the low price for 3 years isn't what she's going to pay. And she might try to, oh, wait, that's backwards. I got that backwards. If it's evil Elliot, I did that. Sorry, I flipped. I have to sell it at the reasonable price because it's only 3 harvests. If somehow I'm trying to squeeze Rachel, sorry, Rachel, for using alternate universe Rachel, it's Elliot who's being here. I'm the defrauder. If I try to sell the land for too much, I know she needs the land. It's only 3 harvests, but I'm going to insist on a high price. This is what this verse is saying not to do, because she's only going to get 3 harvests. The price should reflect the 3 harvests. Right? Sorry if I confused you by flipping in my head. I just came from this holiday where we stay up late for 2 nights, and I'm like still getting my coffee still not kicking in this morning. Anyways, so the law here, not about regular buying and selling, but about buying and selling land in the Jubilee cycle and charging a fair price based on where you are in this. All right, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to stop the share for a second and say the following with that. So what's going on here, right? If you've been with us the last 7 or 8 pages, and you'll be with us the next couple, the rabbis in this section of the Talmud that are using those 2 verses I highlighted in blue to say charge fair prices in the marketplace are talking about regular transactions. They're not saying anything about going back to your holdings and the Jubilee and the cycle. So what's happening here? So this is one of those occasions where the rabbis take a law in the Torah that's narrow, and then they expand it really wide. And right, it's a law about charging a fair price when you exchange land in the land of Israel based on where you are in the Jubilee cycle. And they say, we're going to take the ethical mandate here. We're going to take what the Torah is saying about how we should act in these situations and apply it to every time we buy and sell something from our neighbor. And then we say it's going to be price protection for the buyer and for the merchant. And then we talk about what about experts? And we talk about, can you waive the rights, right? There's more of a conversation about how much can we expand it and how much do we want to take the ethical principle that the Torah applies to this case and apply it to all cases. And as we'll see in the next couple of days, expands to even the way we talk about each other, having nothing to do with commerce, but having to do with how do I describe you to other people, right? Am I being am I overreaching with my words? Am I being fraudulent with my words, or am I speaking within the realm of ethics and truth? It expands even further. And back to where I started at the beginning. It's a reason why my teachers taught me, and I'm suggesting to you, it's worth looking back at the verses in the Torah that the rabbis and the Talmud are talking about, so you get the context. And I know, especially from my own experience of reading Daf Yomi, the pace of Daf Yomi is fast, and it's hard to take time beyond the reading of the page each day to go back and do a deep dive into the Torah, right, and the Bible to see the context of all these pieces. Because the Daf Yomi commitment is a big one, and we've all made it. And sometimes, the going back and looking up every pasuk to read it in the original context and asking yourself, what did the pasuk mean? What did the verse mean in the Torah? What does it mean in the Talmud? What are the rabbis doing here? To me, that's a great exercise for Talmud, but not a Daf Yomi exercise, because the Daf Yomi read is a different pace for that. But for these pages in particular, this chapter that we're on in particular, I think it's really important to see, because um, you might think, as the rabbis just quote the verse, when you buy and sell property from each other, and property is if sometimes translated in the translations that are out there that you might be using if you're not using the original text, to be defined as not land, but just property or things or objects. You might not even guess that these laws come from land transactions and come from buying and selling in the Jubilee cycle. And you'd miss out on the fact that this whole exploration of this whole rule, this whole law, this whole system of laws that the rabbis put on us is about expanding, taking advantage of a pasuk that says don't wrong each other when you buy and sell land, and apply it as broadly as they can, because the ethics of the situation seem to apply not just to what the Torah is talking about, but about so many other things. And that's where we see it in the Talmud. So I'm going to pause here. I see there's been some conversations in the chat that they're the hellos from all over the globe, but I haven't had a chance to follow all the questions yet. I've seen some great things. Rachel, have you noticed anything that we should address, or should we open it up for people to ask questions?
Please feel free to ask questions. I see a little bit. There's people are commenting that this feels more like a leasing agreement than a sale agreement, which is reminding me, somebody, if you know better than me, please jump in and say, but I lived in England for a very short time, and I remember they have very strange kind of, to me, laws like this too, where when you buy land, you actually only own it in the family for 100 years and then it's up. Right? You can't buy land in perpetuity.
Oh, that's interesting.
So somebody who knows more, please feel free to jump in, because I'm hazy on those laws.
Right. It is true. The biblical system for Israelites and their descendants to buy and sell land in the land of Israel is set up to be a leasing agreement for up to 50 years. And I can speak to the Jewish version of that, which is God, the Torah's perspective is God gave us the land and divided up amongst us, and we're meant to have the plot of land that God gave us. And if life happens and that changes, fine, but every 50 years we're going to reset.
Yeah, and God, of course, is the true owner. People don't really own it. We're just
right.
God's tenants.
We're just guests. Right. And it does.
But just like the Canaanites were before us, and we could get kicked out too,
Right. Well, and biblical law influenced laws in some places. I know in Israel today it's complicated because some of the land laws are based on the Ottoman Empire, but then also influenced because the British were in Israel also. Like the notion of land, I think it doesn't go back to the Bible, the land laws in Israel, but I think everyone is technically leasing from the government in Israel. I believe that to be the case in Israel too, that no one really owns their land. It's just long-term possession of it. And even in America, we have a bit of that, right? The government has the right of eminent domain to, build a highway through your house if they choose to. And that's a whole thing on its own. All right, who's got a question for our waning minutes?
Yeah, I will address a logistics thing, which is to say, I apologize. I want to apologize publicly. The reminder email did not seem to go out this morning. Not sure what the snafu was there. We did cancel a lot of reminders this week because of Pesach in the company, and it's possible that this one got caught up in a large cancellation sweep. So I will look into what happened. My colleague Mara jumped on and sent a reminder at about 9:35, which is not ideal, but I know some of you caught that and are here because of that. So we're so glad you're here. And of course, as always, it's good to remind people this is being recorded. It will go up onto YouTube, and there will be a link at the bottom of tomorrow's mailing. So much for logistics. Are there substantive questions about how ona'ah works in the Torah versus how the rabbis think about it as we head into the Oven of Achnai story, which may be the most written about story in the Talmud, as far as I know, which is we're going to come up to on page 59, which is, I believe, in 2 days.
Comment. I do see in the chat someone.
And you should enjoy our piece on it. We will. Oh, my screen wants to give everybody a thumbs up. You should enjoy the piece that we're going to send out on it, but know that there is tons and tons of ink spilled by all kinds of really interesting writers on this, all kinds of interesting essays. So ours is a dip your feet into the story kind of piece. And if you are inspired by the story, I encourage you all to check it out in the Talmud, of course, and then beyond.
Do you want to say I saw a question from Lynn, or I guess a reference? I think it was Lynn. Yeah, well, now I lost it. It might have been Lynn, or I'm giving credit to Lynn for something.
Yes. Okay, Liz. Thank you, Lynn. Sorry, I didn't mean to ignore you about the Prose Bowl.
Right, about the Prose Bowl. We've seen it, and I think we'll see it again. The rabbis, Hillel actually, right, goes back to the early rabbinic era, created a legal system by which you could allow a sale of land to maintain itself past the Prose Bowl year. There's a whole piece of property law that's a whole interesting conversation. What they noticed was no one wanted to sell land. There was buying and selling land stopped the closer you got to the Jubilee. Because even if prices became fair, people are like, I'm not, if I'm selling a land, if I'm buying land, it's just for a year, it's not worth it. Or for 2 years, it's not worth it. If I'm just going to have to give it back. There's sort of a market correction in that land sales stopped as you got close to the Jubilee, and that created unforeseen economic problems. Even though the Torah says you should still buy and sell land, just the fair price, it stopped. And Hillel makes a takana, rabbinic enactment, that sort of undoes this Jubilee resetting of the land. It appears in a couple different places in the Talmud, and we've seen it before in Daf Yomi, and I think we're going to see it again. But so there's a longer story about the content of this chapter of the Torah in rabbinic literature, none of which shows up in our chapter, which just takes 2 of the verses that say don't wrong one another and applies it again to the broader context, not just the limited context. But thanks for that shout out.
All right. I think we're coming up on the hour, so maybe it's time to wind down. I hope again, wishing everyone a wonderful last few days of Pesach with lots of delicious chametz-free food and time with family if that's possible. Hope you're having good weather where you are. And when we meet again, we will be post-holiday. So thank you, Rabbi Goldberg, for allowing us to take some time out of the Talmud and into the Torah, which of course is where the rabbis' minds are all the time. And so that's really, really helpful exercise. And for being so available right after Seder's to teach this class, much appreciated. Thank you to all of you who valiantly found old reminder emails and clicked on the link to join us this morning. We will check in on what is happening with the reminders. We will see you, of course, in your inbox tomorrow morning and in this space in exactly a week. Thank you, everybody. Moadim l'simcha.
Take care, everybody.